off into space in a way that people who are Republicans are wringing their hands. Like, what is going on here? And this is the thing that, as long as it stays as a conversation about Trump versus Kamala versus rather like than Harris versus the sort of mainstream Americans belief systems, and when it comes to like swing voters and things like that, that's better for Democrats. And it has not failed them yet. Like, they can keep poking Trump and he keeps rising to it. And so I think that's why you're going to see him keep doing it.
So I was going to say, I enjoy fun in any campaign season, right? Any long campaign, but you both have made some nods to at least uncertainty, right? And so I want to pick that thread up now in our last few minutes. And I'm going to go back to Tuesday night of the Democratic National Convention and former First Lady Michelle Obama emphasizing in her speech that the energy is high for Democrats right now, but not to be complacent.
It's up to us to remember what Kamala's mother told her. Don't just sit around and complain. Do something. So if they lie about her, and they will, we've got to do something. If we see a bad poll, and we will, we got to put down that phone and do something. If we start feeling tired, if we start feeling that dread creeping back in, we got to pick ourselves up, throw water on our face, and what? Do something. We only have 2.5 months, y'all, to get this done.
Evan, James, we've talked policy and trolling and humor and Kamala Harris defining herself, et cetera. There is ground game, get out the vote, precinct by precinct organizing. And as we get closer to voting dates, and I say dates because of early voting, et cetera, in states all around the country, that emphasis shifts. How are each of you thinking about that piece now? James Fallows.
I thought it was very striking that so many of the major speeches at the convention, notably Oprah and Michelle Obama with two very, very powerful speeches, but Barack Obama too, and Kamala Harris last night, they were trying to make people feel conditional optimism, that things could get better, but they're not going to automatically get better. And it's still a long road ahead. And it seems notable to me that as Donald Trump spends less time trying to win any actual swing voters, he seems to be concentrating more and more on the machinery of the election, of making it harder for people to vote, having some control of how the votes are counted, how they're certified, et cetera. So I thought it was a well-coordinated combination of here's what to be hopeful for, but here's what you need to do day by day by day. And Coach Walls, as we say, was putting this into a final drive of a football game comparison to. I'm going to say one other thing on early voting. My one-time employer, Jimmy Carter, would turn 100 years old on October 1st. I believe he's already requested his early ballot in Georgia. I think what's keeping him alive now is just not only his own 100th birthday, but the idea that he could see this result.
Wow, that is a profound thought. Evan McMorris-Santoro, in your reporting, as you're talking to voters, potential voters, maybe disenfranchised Americans, what do they want now?
Well, let's start here in Chicago, because I have a story with my colleagues, Kaylin Razor and Jasmine Wright, going up on Notice, notus.org today, specifically about what happens now that the convention is over and about this ground game and ground operation. And we spoke to Jamie Harrison, who is the chair of the Democratic Party, and he was locked in on this idea. This is a great convention. We're having a time of our lives. Everybody's got the T-shirt. Everybody's feeling great. The big sigh of relief after the beginning of the year. But now we're in a dead heat coin flip election against a Republican candidate that has an extreme amount of unity in his party and a very powerful group of supporters who will follow him no matter where he goes. It's a very difficult climb for anybody to go up against, particularly a new candidate that's just building this campaign as they're doing it. And what Harrison told us, the chair of the DNC, is that they have been spent so much time on infrastructure in the past couple of years. Since 2022, they built a bunch of, ground game operations out for that midterm that, if you recall, went surprisingly well for Democrats. Much of that is still in place. And the most interesting thing about this handover, the most interesting thing for the political mind, as I think about this election going forward, is that so much of the infrastructure built by Democrats for this general election is still in place, even though Harris has taken it over. And that, according to Democrats, means that they have the equipment and tools and people who are experienced and ready to go for the final push.
All right. Evan McMorris Santoro is a national political reporter for Notice, Washington-based publication from the nonprofit, nonpartisan All Britain Journalism Institute. Evan, thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks.
And James Fallows, contributing writer at The Atlantic, author of the Substack Breaking the News, chief White House speechwriter for President Jimmy Carter from 1977 to 1978. James, it was great to have you.
Tiziana, thanks very much.
I'm Tiziana Deering. This is On Point.
On Point is a production of WBUR Boston and is distributed by APM, American Public Media.
Support for On Point comes from the Elliott Hotel, a boutique hotel in Boston's Back Bay, near major universities, cultural institutions, Newbury Street shopping and dining, and Fenway Park Entertainment. ElliottHotel.com. And Seed. Seed's DSO1 is a 24-strain 2-in-1 probiotic and prebiotic engineered to survive digestion, support healthy regularity, and promote whole body health. Learn more at seed.com/public.
This is KUOW-FM Seattle, KUOW Tumwater, KQOW Bellingham. It's Friday and it's almost noon. That means KUOW's Week in Review is just a few minutes away. Here's your host, Bill Radke.
Hey there. We just got finished listening to On Point here on KUOW, and we're not going back. No. We've got Week in Review coming up, and Bernard, when we listen, we win. So stay tuned as we react to the Democratic convention, and we ask whether Washington's a political bellwether, and what's a bellwether, and are Washington liberals intolerant, and should they be? How do you feel about King County being the headquarters of that icon of consumption? Capitalistic consumption. Costco is on the docket, and we'll ask what made you smile. So much good stuff coming up on Week in Review.
Support for KUOW comes from Kaiser Permanente, offering an integrated model of care delivered by connected teams who all work together to help keep their patients healthy. Kaiser Permanente, care for all that people are.
Hey, it's Luke Burbank. This week on Livewire, comedian turned author Ian Carmel on discovering a new world of pants after he lost a considerable amount of weight.
And there's some pitfalls there. I have a pair of pants covered in palm trees and coconuts that I bought right after I lost the weight, and I was like, this is the guy I am now.
That's this week on Livewire from PRX.
Join Luke Burbank for Livewire tomorrow at noon on 94.9 KUOW. It's rainy and 58 degrees in Seattle. Today we expect to reach a high of 63. Showers today, tonight, and tomorrow, and then partly sunny on Sunday.
Support for KUOW comes from Cherry Creek Windows and Doors, specializing in sales and installation of replacement windows for Seattle and East Side homes, featuring Marvin Windows and Doors. Learn more at the Wallingford showroom or online at cherrycreekwindows.com.
Live from NPR News in Washington, I'm Lakshmi Singh. Independent presidential candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. is ending his campaign. In his announcement a short time ago, he thanked his supporters.
I'm here to tell you that I will leverage your tremendous accomplishments to serve the ideals that we share, the ideals of peace, of prosperity, of freedom, of health, all the ideals that motivated my campaign.
However, he remained critical of the Democratic Party as he recounted the changes last month that saw President Biden dropping out of the race and endorsing Vice President Kamala Harris's nomination. There were reports that Kennedy might endorse former President Donald Trump's campaign. However, in his remarks today, he did not clarify that would be the case. Vice President Harris heads back to Washington today after closing out the Democratic National Convention in Chicago. NPR's Deepa Shivaram reports Harris will now try to maintain the momentum she's had in the weeks of her unprecedented campaign.
With 74 days left until the election, Harris will continue to travel to swing states to shore up support. But she'll have to balance the campaign trail with debate prep and a sit-down interview that Harris pledged to do before the end of the month. Some polls show Harris has gained a lead in the race over former President Trump, though many are within the margin of error. Harris told supporters last night that they could party and celebrate the end of the convention, but then it's time to get to work. Deepa Shivaram, NPR News, Chicago.
Former President Donald Trump has called the Biden-Harris administration weak on the U.S. economy and on immigration. He continues to court voter support today in Nevada and Arizona. In other news, a federal judge dismissed 2 felony charges against 2 former Louisville police officers related to the deadly raid on Breonna Taylor's home in 2020. Louisville Public Media's Giselle Roden has details.
2 years ago, former Louisville Metro Police officers Joshua James and Kyle Meany were accused of providing false information on the search warrant for Breonna Taylor's apartment. Prosecutors say that resulted in her death. The judge said what actually led to Taylor's death was her boyfriend, Kenneth Walker, firing a shot at officers who were breaking down their door after executing a no-knock warrant on the apartment. Neither James nor Meany was present for the fatal raid. James still faces charges related to records falsification in a federal investigation, which could lead to a 40-year prison sentence. Meany is still charged with lying to the FBI, which could carry up to 5 years in prison. For NPR News, I'm Giselle Roden in Louisville.
U.S. stocks are trading higher this hour. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is now up 351 points, or more than 0.75%, at 41,066. The Nasdaq has risen more than 1%. You're listening to NPR News.
This is KUOW News. I'm Kevin Kniestead in Seattle. It's been 1 year since Mayor Bruce Harrell launched his plan to revive downtown Seattle and turn it into a place people want to spend time in. KUOW's Joshua McNichols checked in on his progress.
The mayor's downtown activation plan has 46 action items, from more murals to better street lighting. His office says 27 of those initiatives are in progress and 16 are complete. For example, the city's program to fill vacant storefronts with artists and small businesses has expanded. If you walk the Seattle waterfront today, you'll see tiny shipping containers on the sidewalk with pop-up retail businesses in them. But some of the city's strategies could take a long time to bear fruit. Take the coming rule changes aimed at making it easier to build housing downtown. Those may be helpful, but many developers won't break ground on projects until interest rates come down. Joshua McNichols, KUOW News.
Prosecutors have charged a man accused of trying to kidnap children on Mercer Island. Charging documents say that in June, the suspect tried to lure a 9-year-old child into his car by showing off a stuffed animal. When the child ran off, the driver tried to lure a younger sibling who also ran back home. Kentman Mohammed Ajoli is charged with attempting kidnapping in the incident. There'll be some significant traffic closures and restrictions over the weekend. WashDOT says that I-405 will be closed northbound in Renton from Highway 167 interchange to Highway 169 from 11:59 tonight until 4 a.m. Monday. Also, Highway 520 will be closed in both directions from I-5 in Seattle to 92nd Avenue Northeast starting tonight at 11 till 5 o'clock Monday morning. WashDOT also says that the Mercer Street exit from southbound I-5 will close from 10 p.m. tonight until 5 a.m. Monday. Southbound State Route 167 between State Route 516 and South 277th was scheduled to be closed this weekend, but has been postponed due to rain in the forecast. This is KUOW News.
Support for NPR comes from NPR stations. Other contributors include Made in Cookware. Made in Cookware is crafted by chefs for use in restaurants and home kitchens around the world. Their cookware can be found at madeincookware.com. This is NPR.
Welcome to Friday. Welcome to KUOW's Week in Review. Hi, I'm Bill Radke. You're about to get caught up on the convention, Democratic one, and the jungle primaries and freedom fests and 3-pound pretzel tubs. So just stay tuned all hour. We'll even smile about something by the end of this hour, I promise. My guests, my panelists for this week in review, Washington Policy Center Communications Director David Boze. Welcome back.
Great to be here. It's always fun.
Good to have you. KUOW Soundside host and, how can you do both? And co-host of the Sound Politics podcast, which I listen to on the regular. Libby Denkman, welcome back.
Oh, thank you, Bill. Yeah, I don't know how I do both, but I do. Somehow we get it done.
A lot of talking with your co-host this week about him being in Chicago.
There has been some chatter, yeah, and you can find Sound Politics on your favorite podcast app.
Well put. Author of KUOW's daily newsletter. Do you identify as the station's resident nerd? Is that fair to say, Dyer?
That's
Oxley?
the branding I'm promoting.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm
Yeah.
pushing it out there.
Good luck with that.
What are the credentials for that position?
Yeah, what do you have to do to be a nerd?
A lot of Star Trek.
That might come up later. Nerdiness might come up a little bit later in the show as well. Who watched some Democratic National Convention? Anybody?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
I watched it. I mean, I kept thinking it's like if thousands of people who were told a month ago they had 2 broken legs suddenly leapt from their hospital bed and were like having a dance party together. That was the energy that it brought. Oprah was using her car giveaway voice. Like this was optimism at max, coming out of a very pessimistic few months and honestly more than a year, according to voter polls for Democrats looking at their chances if Biden was the nominee. So yeah, it was remarkable to see the turnaround and how quickly the Harris campaign pulled together that convention.
Libby, you make me laugh there because I was just asked this by a friend of mine who was saying, you know, this campaign is remarkable. Kamala Harris got all the support and all this adulation. It's like a sentient toaster could have showed up, replaced Joe Biden, and people would have just felt like they were exactly like resurrected from the dead. It's like, oh my gosh, we got a shot here. So
the convention should have been in Phoenix, the way it was rising.
That is an excellent point. They should have been in Phoenix. It is the Phoenix convention all the way.
You do got to keep in mind, though, that, I mean, it's the DNC. This is essentially a party for the members. So,
yeah.
I mean, it's going to be hyped anyway. John Legend shows up, you know, which is, I don't know, pretty great.
Lil Jon was my highlight, to be honest.
Well, there you
the Georgia
go.
roll call, that was quite something.
Yeah.
But I think if there was something that stood out for me on this, I mean, kind of beyond all that, it feels like, and I don't know if it's for their own party or for the election or both, but they're trying to like kind of reset the tone, right? This sense of kind of like civility, everyone belongs, you can disagree and that's cool, you know, which hasn't felt like it's been part of political rhetoric for quite a few years.
Do you mean within the Democratic Party or
I don't know if they're trying to tell the Democrats themselves this as well, or if they're trying to tell like America as a whole, because yeah, it is a DNC party, or you know, people are using this for sound bites and they're reporting on this. So the messages are going national. I do feel like that was kind of the tone they were trying to set. Choosing Tim Walz, I think, is definitely part of that marketing factor. He definitely appeals to a lot of demographics that I think Democrats aren't really stereotyped as, but they do exist, and maybe they just don't feel all that seen out
Small
there.
town defensive coordinators.
Yeah, exactly.
High school football coaches.
There's plenty of Democratic hunters out there and things like that, but yeah, I feel like the tone setting was the thing that like really stood out for me, which is kind of the strategic foot forward that they're trying to do at this point.
Oh, 100%. I think, you know, you hit the nail on the head. It's not about the policies. Most people are not going to remember the policies. They're going to remember whether they had warm, fuzzy feelings watching the speech, or whether they were angry, or whether they were, you know, disgusted or anything like that. So they're trying to generate this kind of, you know, that's why you saw the American flags just absolutely everywhere. It wasn't a kneeling convention on the final day. It was American flags everywhere. We're super patriotic. Look at the colors of the stage are chosen very carefully. It's all very, very managed. And I'm saying this for both parties. I mean, this is just the way politics is because it's a TV production.
Yeah.
And you know, Democrats of course have the advantage because all the cool celebrities love to be Democrats, and they get them. Republicans are just excited if one or two show up. Usually,
but
a wrestler
Democrats,
of some kind or a country music star.
They somehow set themselves up for disappointment because somebody started the Beyonce rumor.
Yeah.
And then everybody thought, oh, is she going to show up? What's going to happen? The Washington delegation wore their hats and their sashes. And so
The
therefore.
Beyonce cowboy, blinged cowboy hats.
Yeah, poor John Legend, poor Little John, poor,
Poor James Taylor.
Getting bumped. But I mean, the Dixie Chicks, the Chicks now, anybody, Pink, poor Pink, who performed, nobody was going to be what Beyonce, the promise of Beyonce was. So they did set themselves up
I think
for a
anybody could
fall.
play Prince, and I would be happy. I just want to throw that high five to John. Legend.
That
But
was
didn't
pretty
they play
fun, yeah.
Beyonce at the very end though? Was that? Do you think they did that on?
Harris uses that song,
Okay.
uses
That's her
Freedom,
theme.
from Cowboy Carter as a theme, with permission from Beyonce. But can I just point out that Harris speech, 40 minutes. That's how long that speech was. She covered, her bio. She covered her defense, the way that she would handle the military. She talked about bringing back border security, the bipartisan bill. She talked about some policy. 90 plus minutes was Trump's speech just during the RNC. That is as long as movies are. And the amount of attention span that people have to stay with the message, is just not that anymore. That's as long as Toy Story. So I think also there was a discipline to this that you didn't see at the RNC because the RNC had so much confidence, right? They were riding in such a way that they looked at these polls and Biden as the opponent and thought this is a steamroll, and you could feel that, and you could see it in the discipline shown in the different conventions.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's discipline. I think you've got a personality on stage. It's like
Sure.
when Bill Clinton, remember his speeches were famously, you're too
Yes,
young.
I
I'm
remember.
old. But
I remember.
Bill Clinton just gave these long, he would just go off
Stem-winders.
teleprompter and he'd just go on. Now, Bill Clinton, I think, was a much better at detail kind of speaker. I mean, he could speak and there was a narrative flow there because that's just the kind of speaker he was. With Trump, he's, just like his book, Art of the Deal, and all the speeches, he just kind of whatever captures his imagination. He's trying to, if you read the speech that was written, which was the first half hour or so, he kind of stuck to the script. That was much more moving. It was punchy.
Unity.
And then
I got shot at.
Then it's like, you know what? I really like having this crowd cheer me. I think I'm going to go on for another half hour. Some people cover, some people drop out. He's probably just trying to squeeze as much television time as possible because he's a big believer in that. But I agreed with you. I noticed that right away that her speech was short and it was punchy. I think it works to her advantage because, frankly, if the more people know about her, the more people have a chance to disagree with her. And right now, their strategy is basically, I'm the resurrector of this party ticket. I'm your alternative to Trump. And that's, for a lot of people, that's all she needs. And so
Well, how do
the
you
rest
feel
of the
about
stuff
that?
gets more
Because first of all,
controversial.
David, are you a Republican? Or are you
I've always been a Republican.
Okay.
So, personally, yeah.
How do you feel? I understand that maybe, especially against somebody like Trump, and this is a very rushed process, and she's relatively new. So just here's who I am, here's my vibe is enough, and it's strategic. But does it bother you? Do you feel like this is a disservice to American voters that she's giving relatively little policy specifics?
I feel like American voters do their own disservicing for the most part.
Well,
I mean,
that's fair.
They're not as interested. I mean,
yes.
look, there's plenty. When I watch these things, I do it and I was at both conventions in 2004. I want to say maybe it's 2000. I can't remember now. But anyway, I try and watch them as though I've never seen these people before, and I just want to know about. I try not to insert my own feelings. I try to wipe the slate clean and just watch and see how do I feel about watching this if I was just trying to absorb it. And
how'd you feel?
I thought she did an okay job. I thought she presented the way she wanted to. She was energetic. The first thing you think of is young, relatively speaking. I know she's actually not that young, but compared to Biden and then Trump does not.
She's a new generation. She's
Right.
on the cusp with Gen X.
Right.
Yeah.
Trump does not project himself as old as Biden, even though he is relatively old. He's he defies age in some ways, but she immediately projects a youth and energy and appeal that is striking. So I think she did what she needed to do. The governor of Michigan, when I watched her give her
Big
speech,
Gretch.
I thought Republicans should be glad that she's not the nominee because
Agreed.
I thought that she had a lot of poise and power. And she avoids, there's some speech habits, like at the beginning of Kamala's speech, she used the same.
Kamala, by the way.
Kamala, sorry. The same adjective like 4 times in a row, and it's just kind of it's just one of those habits that some people have. And the governor of Michigan struck me as not having.
The bench is really
weakness.
deep for Democrats. You have to watch this convention and see Pete Buttigieg, strong speech. Gretchen Whitmer, I think, was the standout for me as well. But you had Raphael Warnock as somebody who gave a really stirring speech. Tim Walz coming out of relatively unknown in the matter of weeks, coming to the top of that VP stakes, and then really being contrasted. I mean, Josh Shapiro gave a good speech, but and Senator Kelly from Arizona, but I think Tim Walz really did prove why he was chosen to be Kamala Harris's VP pick. He was raw, like emotional. He didn't have all his edges sanded down, but he really projected emotion. He projected every man from the stage, and it really stuck out. I will say she has not gone through the primary process that lets you kind of develop that policy platform that Dave Boze is talking about, but she has been slowly having these policies come out, right? So $25,000 for new home buyers, looking at increasing the stock of housing by helping to reduce regulation. Who knows if she can do that with local governments being what they are, talking about expanded the child tax credits. Like, there is a Kamala Harris platform that's coming out. Like I said, the bipartisan immigration bill that she wants to resurrect.
That was a bill that conservatives were signed on to. That you're right. That was not a super lefty, open borders. If you were expecting, she's going to be so liberal, I'm agreeing with you, Libby. That's true.
I don't think that stuff is as important as, because everybody has a similar sounding policy. I'm going to get tough on the border. Both people say the same thing.
But
and
she's
the devil's
specifically
in the
saying,
details.
I would sign this bill into law.
Right.
Now, since that bill may not even make it through Congress, that's where the details come
Right.
in.
Well, I'm just saying, and whatever that bill could be the same name, and it could be something else.
right.
So the devil's in the details on those things. But I think, for her, it's more interesting that she hasn't been giving press conferences and other things, so she hasn't had that. Well, I mean, not that the press, I think, is going to be all that difficult on her, but I think that there is something about the primary process where it puts them through this grueling test of, can they respond? Now, Trump's unique. I mean, there's nobody really like him, because I personally don't think he does well responding to criticisms or with policy points or other things.
Yeah, Nikki Haley can tell you that.
Right, she can. And personality, though, just dominates for him. And so Reagan was called the Teflon president. No way. Trump's got that beat all the way on that stuff. But I do think that presents, somewhat of a challenge for Harris, because there will come a point, it's getting really close now, but she's got to get out there and have some interviews, one would think. And that can be something unique. The vice presidential choice, if it happens, the vice presidential choice was more interesting for Harris, because she picked this guy who represents kind of a different demographic, whereas Trump basically picked a guy who represents Vance, who represents the demographic that he already has.
It's a legacy
It's like
pick.
a double down.
Yeah, it's the next generation of Trumpism. Can I just really point out, though, the emotional center of earlier in the week when women took the stage and told their reproductive health stories, including women who had really scary experiences being turned away at emergency rooms, a young woman who's very brave talking about her story of being assaulted by her stepfather, and the ways that women who are in these states that have restricted abortion care now do not have the options that she had. Like, that is the other goal that I think Democrats had this week that they really hammered home, was the difference in this country post-Dobbs. And I think that trying to reclaim that word freedom was absolutely a goal at the beginning of the week. And I think that they have tied that now to reproductive health care in a successful way. We know it's broadly, abortion access is broadly popular, even increasing in popularity in national polls. So that was a goal, and I do think that they successfully drove that home.
Even saying that the Republicans would get rid of IVF, which the Republicans say they would never do.
But talk to Alabama Supreme Court justices about that.
Yeah,
Fetal personhood is a real movement in the conservative wing of the party.
Can I ask you about something relatively specific to Washington State? Because I don't think any other states had 10% of their delegates voting present instead of voting for Kamala Harris. And Washington State, you saw the roll call, turned down for what, et cetera. But Washington State came up and said, I think it was 9 votes present and 101 votes for Vice President Harris. So those delegates that was a pro-Palestine, ceasefire, Israeli arms embargo kind of vote. And there were some Democrats who were either promising or fearing a really chaotic or violent convention over this topic. What did you make of how the party and how Vice President Harris handled that?
Go ahead.
I didn't think that there would be that big of a because the target is Trump on this, and so the people who are going to protest are going to have to weigh: do we want to disrupt the Democratic convention when they finally have a shot here, and somebody that might actually side with us on some things at least, or the other? And it was the same, by the way, with George W. Bush. During the conventions, the level of protest, there were numerous groups and thousands of protesters, but the general disposition of protesters was much angrier and much touchier at the Republican than the Democrat. And I know in the past, in the 60s, it was different, but this is a different era, and I didn't think that would happen, and it didn't happen. So she didn't have to deal with it.
There was a lot online. There was a lot of social media, among progressives talking about the fact that the speaker that they wanted to have a member of a legislature they wanted to have speak, a Palestinian American, was not allowed to speak, even though the family of an Israeli hostage did speak. And the uncommitted movement said they supported that, and they talked about it at a press conference, that they were happy to see a hostage's family speak. They just wanted also a Palestinian voice. DNC decided not to go with that. There was a sit-in outside. But in terms of the scale of what was expected, the organizers initially were saying tens of thousands of people. It just didn't pan out that way. And I think that Dave's right that this was a moment where the party, it seems like, has started to say, yes, there's still real serious fault lines, but we are looking ahead to November and seeing what ultimately our collective goal is, which is to defeat Trump.
Yeah. We got a comment we texted our KUOW Community Feedback Club about this. Madeline in Columbia City said, proud to be a Democrat, but the DNC response to the crisis in Gaza is a little all lives matter right now. That leaves a sour taste over the convention for me. Don in Capitol Hill said, refreshing to see the Obamas again and hear their message of hope at this time of deep division. His crowd size joke was also well placed. Was it though? I noticed Vice President Harris didn't really do the zinger jokey thing. She was more serious about her Trump aversion.
No, she did a zinger. Remember, it's quoting her mom. I don't know if it's appropriate
Get
for
stuff
public.
done or
no,
something
it
like
was.
that.
It
Don't
was.
do it half.
Yeah.
Oh, that.
Which
Yeah,
we
but
played
that's
on the
not
air just a half hour ago.
That's not insult comedy, though.
No, it's not insult comedy. But if you're running for president, unless your name is Trump, you let other people do that.
Yes.
For the most part.
Yeah.
And that's why the rest of them are out there doing that kind of thing.
Michelle Obama kind of surprised me with her zinger about, has anyone told Trump that maybe that the White House is that one of those black jobs that he talks about? Like, that was, you don't see Michelle Obama, or at least historically you hadn't seen her kind of really go at somebody in the way that she did in that speech.
I don't know. I think at her last convention she went after Romney pretty hard, but I think both Obamas were like, for a certain generation, that's the presidency, right? I mean, for me it was Reagan because I grew up in the '80s, and then for nobody remembers Reagan now and the younger generation, but Obama was a really defining president for a lot of people. So they see that, and whether you liked him at the time or disliked him, there's always something that kind of erases some of the bad stuff. So it's like, I remember these days, and he's back there, and he's a masterful speaker. And both Obamas are very, very good at speaking, at rallying crowds. I don't know how effective that kind of thing is because there's all kinds of speeches, but it's like endorsements. Everybody wants them, and then you wonder, does it actually do anything?
You also got to kind of write these speeches for the speaker too, and I kind of expect that, like Walls saying to mind your own damn business. That's what we say, where we're from, and Kamala Harris is kind of that. I don't know how to describe it. Churchy mom that from like your elementary school, that when she said that joke, that what her mom said, she kind of like laughs at it like, yeah, I just said that. Like, that's kind of her personality. Like, everybody knows that person in their life, that kind of like adult in the room that's just kind of a little bit
like
buttoned
fun,
up, but
fun auntie energy.
Yeah, exactly. But that's not Obama, who can be like, crowd sizes and things like that. I think the speech was kind of written for her personality. And I'm not sure those zingers, giving her some stand-up, routines is probably going to work too well for what she can do naturally.
One part that I thought was a zinger was when Michelle Obama said that she was among the most qualified people to ever run for president because, the guy from The Apprentice won, so you don't have to be the most qualified.
But as
ever,
a woman, you
right?
do though. As a woman, you are challenged on your credentials. I do think that that's one of the reasons she had to say that.
I think anybody running for president is going to be challenged on credentials. I view that as the same as Obama. People described Obama as breaking through the ceiling. I don't think it existed anymore. I think other people had broken it before him, and he's historically, he historically walked through that door that was opened by others before him. Remember, Colin Powell pulled an easy win for him after the Gulf War if he would have decided to run, but he didn't. And I think the same. There's going to be a woman president. It just depends on the woman. I'm just saying that it's hard to argue that she's among the most qualified to ever run, or even among various candidates that might have run, even among some other, probably other Democrat women that could have run. But it's one of those arguments that people write the speeches, and I'm just watching it as that part. It was more like me instead of the blank slate me. Mm-hmm. But I was watching it just thinking, all these speeches, they just have to say whatever makes that person be so great because nobody's allowed there's no fault. They're the best ever. This person's the most qualified ever. And it just made me laugh.
Can I just bring this back to the current president of the United States really briefly? I know that the Democratic Party would like to move on. They gave him his one day, and most people didn't mention or mentioned him really briefly. I think that this convention was this moment to recognize that, yes, there are fault lines over Gaza, but overall, Joe Biden took a party in 2020 where he was sort of, okay, we'll go with Biden. There were more exciting candidates in the race, but he was the consensus that they could compromise on. And he was seen as this centrist. And in office, he became one of the most progressive presidents in our history. And in the process, widened the tent of the Democratic Party, kind of brought the progressives right on in there. And you saw AOC, of all people, giving one of the most full-throated speeches and thanking him, and to the end, before he dropped out, being one of his strongest supporters. So Joe Biden's evolution is also really interesting here. And they did some of sort of thanking him for his choice to drop out, which was very rare and remarkable. However, I think that the effect on the Democratic Party that he has had is also something Kamala Harris is going to be surfing right into November.
One more question we asked before we take a break here. We asked our listeners, our Community Feedback Club members, what about apparently our anthem, our state's anthem is now Macklemore's Can't Hold Us. So we asked, what do you think? Is there a better option? I'm getting a face from Libby. I'm not sure how to interpret that.
Don't go to me. Don't go to me.
I'll say it. No, it's not our anthem.
No.
I mean, if we have to do a Macklemore song, I think Thrift Shop is a little bit more emblematic of the persona of Washington.
But that's not a convention song.
No, it's not. Washington songs that are official are not going to hype us up anyway. Washington, My Home is not inspiring.
Roll on Columbia.
Roll on Columbia, the official folk song.
I like that one.
Gold. It's gold.
Okay. The only song that I could find that really incorporates all of Washington out there is an old song called Godzilla Ate Tequila. It's about Godzilla stomping around all of Washington State and destroying everything.
I don't know that one.
Here's what's sad. I do remember that song. But I would think that Nirvana's Entertain Us would be a more fitting.
Yeah. Some listeners said Smells Like Teen Spirit. Seth in Fremont said that. Sam in Tacoma wanted a Slater-Kinney track.
What about Hendrix?
Jimi Hendrix showed up. Carol in Queen Anne, Jennifer in Bitter Lake, and Joe in Bellingham all called for Louie Louie. And I actually asked the vice president about this, and she said, Louie Louie, that was a very good song about 60 years ago.
But we are not going back.
So she seemed to really rule that out. I mean, as you can hear, pretty emphatic, and the crowd's on her side.
Yeah.
They don't like Louie Louie.
How about Heart, Barracuda?
Let's see what the crowd thinks.
I think the Jimi Hendrix nomination is one of the most solid if we pick an instrumental.
But the crowd is clearly saying we're not going back. I don't know if you're listening to your
I'll
voters.
go back to Jimi Hendrix. I will stand in defiance on that one.
I mean, are we saying Macklemore is current though? Macklemore is still that song's getting a little long in the tooth. Also, I'm not,
At the rate pop culture moves, perhaps.
Yeah.
I like that he says we will fight till it's over, because no more fighting after it's over. That is so inefficient. I'll give that.
Don't waste energy.
You don't want to burn that energy.
Yeah.
Listen, if you want, listeners, if you want to join KUOW's Community Feedback Club, you can. Just give us a text. Here's the phone number, 206-926-9955. You see how the 9, we're like nearly 95 FM, and the number is 206-926-9955. You just text the word club to that number, or just maybe this is easier for you. Go to KUOW.org/feedback and let us know what you think. Okay, we're going to take a break here. Democrats were partying. Republicans had a party too. And in fact, the co-host of the new Sound Politics podcast.
Got it.
Libby Denkman, you were there. We're going to talk about, you'll tell us what happened, and we're also going to ask the question, is Washington a tolerant state? Okay. Will you sit? You're not going anywhere, right?
No, I'm here.
Okay.
I will tolerate sitting here for a little longer.
Right. Right after the break, Libby Denkman, David Boze, Dyer Oxley, come right back, and you can watch the show on YouTube as well.
Well, I saw Godzilla eat up Tukwila. Then he went down, he ate Renton for dessert. He couldn't stand the aroma of the north side of Tacoma, so he gobbled up Puyallup with a burp.
Godzilla ate Tukwila by Dave Phillips on 94.9 KUOW Seattle. It's 12:33.
Hi, I'm Alex Rochester, the Digital Community Outreach Coordinator here at KUOW, one of the real human people who reads and replies to your questions and suggestions for stories. Help us give the auto-reply robots of the world a break.
Thanks.
And share your feedback and ideas at kuow.org/feedback.
Support for KUOW comes from Horizon House. Horizon House, independent living on Seattle's First Hill, welcomes adults 62 and over from diverse backgrounds and cultures, including LGBTQ+. Learn more at horizonhouse.org. And from Seattle Art Museum, presenting an alternative art history from a counterculture movement. Poke in the Eye celebrates the eclectic practices that emerged across the West Coast from the 60s to today. Closing September 2nd. Tickets available at seattleartmuseum.org.
Should we continue with our KUOW Week in Review? What do you think?
Yeah, let's do it.
Thank you, Libby Denkman. Libby hosts the Sound Politics podcast. Would you get on whatever podcast app you favor?
Whatever you like, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, the NPR Politics, or the NPR app, where
Yes.
you can get all kinds of podcasts.
What if I wanted to listen to Soundside, though, which you host?
Oh, sure, the same thing. I mean,
Okay.
that's on Monday through Thursday at noon and 8 p.m., of course, on KUOW. But if you like podcasts, that's on a podcast as well.
Thank you, Libby. Your colleague is here, too. KUOW's daily newsletter auteur, Dyer Oxley, is with us on the panel, and so is Washington Policy Center Communications Director David Boze. My name is Bill Radke. Yes, David?
That's just a dignified name, Oxley.
Oxley.
It is.
I mean, it just sounds like
It gets worse.
I attended
Classing
Oxley.
the joint up.
The full name is Richard Dyer Oxley.
Oh, my.
The third.
Yes.
My monocle is slipping.
I know.
Libby, while your Sound Politics podcast co-host was in Chicago at the DNC, you were at Summer Freedom Fest in Redmond. What happened
Yeah,
there?
Scott Greenstone was having fun in Chicago, but I went to another exotic locale, actually, where I grew up, Redmond, right next to the 60 acres soccer fields, if y'all know that, in Redmond Woodinville Road. And this is a property that Brian Haywood, a big donor to a number of Republican initiatives that are going to be on the ballot this fall, he held his second annual party. And it was like a big festival, kind of an outdoor. Did you go, Dave?
I did not go. No, I had kid stuff.
Yeah.
Have you been
It was
before?
a Saturday afternoon.
I'd actually I'd been out to Brian's place to talk to him the week before or so. So yeah, but
yeah, it's a beautiful property, gorgeous place. They set up a big stage. They had Sweet Child of Mine playing when I walked in, and this was a place I was walking around talking to Republicans. They had a lot of candidates who have gotten through the primary and are trying to win statewide offices or congressional seats in this November's election. And of course, a lot of talk about these 4 initiatives now that are going to be on the ballot. 3 of them really instigated and pushed by the money that Brian Haywood poured into the initiative signature gathering process. And it was really interesting and a good vibe out there. A lot of people talked about the ways that they felt like they couldn't always be themselves in other parts, especially of Western Washington. But Freedom Fest was a spot where they could feel comfy and hang out and hear from candidates that they're considering supporting. And, really kind of have I don't want to use safe space because it's become such a pejorative, but it felt like a kind of cozy homecoming.
They've had these kinds of Freedom Fest for a long time. Different conservative radio stations would sponsor them, usually out in that area. Brian's are different. I'm betting the initiative people would say it's not a Republican. Even though the Republicans sided with them, state party did.
Well, Jim Walsh, the Republican leader, wrote them.
Right.
Yeah.
He'd be like...
Well, they also are going with Let's Go Washington. And I could be wrong on this, but that just makes me think of Let's Go Brandon, which was kind of a rally cry.
Somebody brought that up to you. I did not think that at all. Did you really think that that's what it was
going
for?
That's the first thing I thought of.
Wow.
And if I was marketing for that
campaign, it kind of
blew
my mind.
That would be the first thing I'd bring up.
That's actually the first time I made the association.
Yeah.
It's just me then.
But I think if you're online, you definitely make the association. I don't think it's not just you because somebody else brought it up to me. But these initiatives are supported by somebody. Haywood himself, we chatted and he actually was the one that invited me out to the event. He really identifies more as a libertarian, conservative, small c, but he thinks that this is an opportunity to kind of shift with these initiatives, the pendulum a little bit back to the center from where he sees politics in the state having moved too far left.
Libby, can we remind listeners who aren't all up on this about these initiatives? One would end the carbon cap program.
The Climate Commitment Act. Yep.
Yes.
There's one on the long-term care insurance program.
Making that an opt-in.
Which
optional.
The experts say kind of fundamentally undermine the system, so it would not exist anymore. There's
Capital
one
gains
to
tax.
repeal the capital gains tax on wealthy individuals. It's at $250,000 or more. If you make that on a capital gains transaction in a year, you'll get taxed on the next dollar. And then there's also a natural gas regulation initiative that is not a Haywood-sponsored one, or he at least wasn't in on the ground floor of that, but it's one that Republicans are hoping to see kind of reducing some of these changes the legislature has been making and Inslee has been making around how new buildings can have natural gas.
Right. That one's particularly fascinating because it took off so fast.
It was
it's
remarkable.
Really hard to do, and the building industry just, they put it out there, and it's just amazing to see an initiative get that many signatures that fast and qualify for the November ballot.
Yeah.
They were out in force for that, though. It was hard for me to go to a Fred Meyer or any place without them being at a table at the front door.
Yeah.
So, I feel like they had some kind of effort behind it. Those ones are all kind of questionable for me. The one that really stands out is the carbon auction one. I think that could be the most impactful in that. It's not like they do away with the Climate Commitment Act. They just say you can't fund it, which basically knocks that one down as well. That one is the one I feel that folks are most aware of because that's the one that can most easily be associated with their wallets and where they felt it.
The price of gas.
But other things that there's a lot of arguments that could be made all around on that one that I feel like that's the easiest target. So that's the one I'm kind of watching the most when this comes around.
Yeah, when it comes to polling, the last ones I'm seeing publicly at least are from May, and they're all currently underwater, but that's according to Defend Washington, the group that is formed and funded to try to fight these. The one that is actually the closest to passing.
Sorry, that just reminds me of a poll I saw back in 2016, putting Trump ahead in Washington State, and I had to laugh because I was saying,
who was funding it?
Well, who made this poll? Because that's not a real poll. It's Washington State.
Yeah. But the one that apparently is doing the best so far among these initiatives is the long-term care insurance one. That people want that to be optional. And, I do want to mention, we talked about conservative talk show hosts. John Carlson at KVI was one of the masters of ceremonies at the Summer Freedom Fest. And our old pal, Brandy Cruz. This is kind of a reunion for all of us that used to work over across the street at a different radio station. Yes. Yeah. And so Brandy Cruz is also one of the hosts of that.
I want to get to something about, because I'm eyeing the clock here as I do. something that I listened to your conversation about Summer Freedom Fest on the Sound Politics podcast, and some of the people you spoke to talked about feeling this is a place they could go, like a safe space, as you said. One guy said he was a Trump voter, but would never come out of the closet as a Trump voter because of the repercussions that would rain down. And I bring this up because this week, a Democratic Washington state senator admonished our state's liberals for becoming intolerant. This is Senator Jesse Solomon, a public defender from the Shoreline area. And his Seattle Times editorial reads, quote, "It's becoming increasingly politically challenging in this area to express ideas outside of a narrow bandwidth without unreasonable blowback. Solomon said liberals should embrace, quote, openness to dialogue, consideration of new ideas and complexity, again, this is a Democratic state senator writing, and should leave behind, quote, cancellation, unwillingness to listen and learn, and a belief that you're 100% correct and your opponent is 100% incorrect." So is he stating the obvious, begging the question, or gilding the lily?
I think this needs to be said before anybody says anything. There's nothing that anybody in this room is going to say that is not going to get them hate mail. Okay, this is all stemming
that would
from
back
the Wayne
up his
Luke
entire
controversy.
argument.
So I'm just saying, any complaints out there can be sent to Radke at KUOW.org. I think Solomon actually makes an argument. The argument stands pretty strong that I think folks should at least be discussing it. I think we all know that friend in town who it doesn't matter what you say. If you counter them, their fingers go in their ears, they plug their nose. And heck, just before we went on air, I had on social media, a good friend of mine, and his big message, his meme on his Facebook was that if I unfriended you, it's not because we disagree. It's because I know how you truly believe and you disgust me.
Whoa.
Right?
Yeah.
That happens so often, like around here. And granted, if you unfriended them, how are they going to see that in the first place? But the attitude that brings, I do notice that a lot. I think around our area.
Yeah, you see it in social media all the time. I did a comment the other day on a comedy thing where they interjected politics, and I just said, really? It has to be politics here? I just wanted to laugh, And then the number of comments, aimed at, I hope your day is the poopy icon, and all this kind of thing, just all this anger. And it's ironically from people saying, how they're fighting hate in their lives and all this. So one problem we have is redefining what hate means. Hate is now when someone disagrees with you politically or disagrees with your life or whatever, that's hate, and it's not. Yeah. It's different, and it's an abuse of the term, and it creates uncivil. It limits the possibility of civil conversation. And I think on these issues, Todd Myers of the Washington Policy Center does a lot of work and did a lot of work on the Climate Commitment Act and its costs for people, and showed that we predicted that when it was implemented, that it was going to end up being about 43 to 46 cents per gallon on gas and more on diesel, about 10 cents more on diesel. And it's a formula. It's not our formula. It's the formula they used in California for almost the exact same program. By the way, we're in Washington. We pay twice as much for the same or less benefit as California does. But when we released that, it was the governor saying it's swill, it's hogwash. There's nothing. I mean, and that was his literal words. It's nonsense. And then there's a report he had in 2014 showing that it was going to increase the price of gas. In California, they tell people this is going to increase, and now let's have a conversation about it. It's a bad state of affairs that Washington is less willing to have a legitimate policy conversation about the impacts of legislation and the cost versus the benefits than Washington State is. But we've reached this point where we don't want to do that.
And I think it was a really poor rollout altogether. I mean, compared to California, the allowance prices were much higher right off the bat. I mean, it was, just the program stumbled. It made billions of dollars, but it did have a kind of distorted market that the organizers were not predicting. And the fact that the governor had, made comments along the lines of this is not going to affect things at all. Now, I don't know that we do know exactly how, drilling down how much. I'd have to look at the work that your colleague has done on that. But in terms of the fact that it would affect gas prices in some way, that seemed like a pretty obvious connection. And kind of don't believe your lying eyes to voters, I don't think is a great strategy.
The governor had his own report in 2014 showing that there would be the increase, and
Listen,
I can send you the report.
I'm the clock watcher. We're about to take a break. Is there anything more to say about whether or not did everybody say their piece with hatred and venom and the hate mail to come about what Washington State is a tolerant place or not?
I'm just going to say this. I've said it before, forgive me for repeating, but I've always believed that your mind is a lot like an axe, and if you don't put friction to it, you don't stay sharp.
If you don't,
right? Yeah, and if you don't do that, that means reading books that challenge you. That means making friends with people who challenge you, and if you don't do that, you get pretty dull. You don't cut it.
Okay.
So
I like it.
In real life, you can just get a bumper sticker and just put a bumper sticker on your car that's from the opposite party. If you think everything's tolerant and great, parked in downtown Seattle. So if you're a Democrat, which 90% of Seattle is, the other 8% is socialist, and then there's a couple others. But just do that and see how tolerant everybody is. And then if you're a Republican, slap on a nice Patty Murray sticker and go to Republican. Where some of these Eastern Washington strongholds, the leftovers, and see what happens. And just do the comparison.
I will say the Freedom Fest folks knew I was a public radio reporter. I was clearly designated, and I did get skepticism saying, oh, you're a lefty, you are not maybe a friendly reporter. But everybody was willing to talk to me, not necessarily on tape, again, because they were fearful about being outed as Trump supporters. But they talked to me, they were civil, and we had good conversations.
How could we hear about more about your time at Freedom Fest?
Bill, thank you for asking. You can hear about it on this new podcast that we have called Sound Politics.
Oh.
I don't know if you've heard of it before.
Well,
but...
I know I'm a big fan of yours on Soundside, so I'm sure I'm going to love Sound Politics.
Oh, that's very sweet.
On KUOW, that's Libby Denkman, of course. We have KUOW's Dyer Oxley here and Washington Policy Center's David Boze. I'm Bill Radke. We take the break, we come back, and we wrap up KUOW's Week in Review with an 8-pound tub of pretzels. Stay tuned.
It's 12:48. Robert F. Kennedy Jr. announced a short while ago that he is suspending his presidential campaign. More about that in your top-of-the-hour newscast, which is just about 12 minutes away.
Support for KUOW comes from Third Place Books, presenting Jodi Picoult in conversation with Julia Quinn on Thursday, September 12th, discussing Picoult's new book, By Any Other Name, published by Random House. Tickets available now at thirdplacebooks.com. And from Finney Ridge Cabinet Company, custom and semi-custom cabinets designed with the goal of making homes functional, beautiful, and livable. Featuring Solera Fine Cabinetry. Learn more at prcabinets.com.
Hi, I'm NPR's Shannon Bond. As we head into the 2024 election, what's keeping our elections safe and accurate? Join me September 11th for a special live event in Seattle as we explore these questions and more. Get tickets today at kuow.org/events.
KUOW Live Events, sponsored by Finney Ridge Painting and BECU.
It's KUOW's Week in Review. I'm Bill Radke, chatting with David Boze and Libby Denkman and Dyer Oxley. We're reviewing the week gone by, and this week at Costco headquarters in Issaquah, police arrested hot dogs. Climate demonstrators dressed as Costco hot dogs protesting the company's relationship with Citibank. That bank funds oil and gas projects and also Costco's member-only credit cards. Meanwhile, this week, the New York Times, so that already had me in mind of, how do we feel locally, given the politics of this region, the culture of this region, how do we feel about Costco? And then here comes the New York Times with a profile under the headline, How Costco Hacked the American Shopping Psyche. Quote, for all its piety, the last thing Costco wants is for shoppers to stick to a budget. On the contrary, it wants them to return to the parking lot balancing a wobbly heap of products they had no intention of buying, a strategy known as the Costco effect. How do you all feel about Costco and King County being its HQ?
I have a love-hate relationship with Costco.
What?
Hate? So I've said this before. Look, I understand it. I get the attraction. I was a single guy for a very long time. Everybody always tried to get me to Costco. I could never eat that much broccoli. It just wasn't for me. However, my wife and her mom, my mom-in-law who lives with us, are very, very into Costco, very much. In fact, my mom-in-law refuses to go to Costco with me alone anymore because I don't waste time. I just want to get the stuff off the shelf. Exactly. Everybody's looking at me like I'm
you gotta
evil.
really
Okay.
enjoy yourself. Like you're in a beautiful, just experience. It's not a shopping trip. It's an
Just-
experience.
I have been forged in fire. I have been to Costco on a Sunday. I understand the attraction and the reason to, and it charms you. It wins you over to a certain degree. And yeah, I think there is a little bit of a local warmth felt to Costco. But it's also worth saying that as much as we think that it's a Northwest thing here, Costco adapts. You know,
Yes.
when Costco's in Taiwan, those are products local to them. You can go to Renton and get a whole goat in the freezer section. They know the demographics and the regions that they're going into. And so
Yeah.
Costco, I feel like people have a little bit of a charmed feeling about them wherever they go.
Well, it was really smart strategy too. The New York Times did, again, great reporting on this, and the fact that they are, unlike most retailers, willing to let individual stores experiment with products and let the actual people on the ground then see how they do. I used to live in Southern California, and the Alhambra, everybody shout out Alhambra, Costco was my nearest one, and that has a very large Asian American population. And so the Lunar New Year Costco offerings were off the chain. They were so fun and different, and just seeing that and now reading and understanding the strategy behind that is really fascinating.
I
Yeah.
thought so too. That was what interested me the most, because when I was in college, I worked at Walmart going through, and that was so. I just felt sorry for the managers, because they were told on this end cap, this goes here, and they had their little chart and they're putting stuff up there, and I just thought, oh, good God. And then, and some of the stuff didn't make sense to me. But when you're reading Costco and they're trying to make it so they have this super franchise, well, not franchise, but they have these superstores everywhere, and they're making them also kind of like the small hometown. I mean, that's a win-win. Plus the $1.50 hot dog. I mean,
you can't
and
deny
and the
that.
chicken. I mean, my wife went to Costco to get the plump chicken. I was like, because you go to get the chicken and you're out with
Are you talking
all
about
this.
those roast chickens that they?
Yeah.
My mom-in-law has to get those every single
Yes.
time.
Well, I mean, how can you not? Every
You
time
can't
I
get
go.
just the chicken
Right.
though. You come out with like a clothing steamer
That's
and
the
like a
brilliance of it.
pound of cashews. Like there's no way.
Same with the hot dog. You go in there like, well, while I'm here, I might as well see what's new.
That's-
And then they've moved stuff around, and that's the brilliance
They've
of
actually,
the design.
there's been reporting on this too. I want to say it was also New York Times. That's the entire purpose of that $1.50 hot dog.
Yeah.
Once you're in there,
Sure.
someone's going to be like, oh, there's a free sample. Well, I guess I do need AA batteries. Maybe I should
It's a
get
loss
50.
leader.
Every time I go to a Costco, I think if there was a zombie apocalypse, this is where I would go.
I literally, David Boze, I wrote that down. I said to myself, I love a store where in a zombie apocalypse I could live. IKEA, you'd have enough
Yeah.
meatballs to live. You could probably do a Fred Meyer and a Costco.
But Costco looks like a fortress. They got the metal doors they slide
Yeah, that's
down.
true. They have
very
more
narrow.
security.
You've only got a few places to defend. I mean,
Yeah.
Costco's are just like.
Well, we're saying Hollywood, the next time you remake Dawn of the Dead, it's not in a mall.
Right.
It's obviously a Costco. Yeah, I do think there is that velvet rope feeling too about a Costco. And I know I don't get, I'm a married but childless dog lady. And I know I don't get my money's worth out of the Costco membership, which by the way is going up $5 a year pretty soon.
Outrageous.
Yeah, outrageous. Sam's Club is cheaper, but I just have that feeling when I go in and I show my card, I'm in the club. Like it actually does work in a weird way where you feel like you're getting in.
And what do you see first? You almost always see these cool electronics that have
Yeah.
these beautiful screens and stuff. So you're like, well, now I am amongst the original elite getting these
Yes.
products here.
Look at these AV products.
Think
Hello.
about the positivity that has just emerged just from the one thing at the Costco, and this started because there was a protest.
Yes.
And thinking of that protest, this is the kind of uphill battle I think any protester has, because Costco does inspire such warm feelings. And I don't know if you folks do, but I have friends that work at Costco, and all they have to say is just amazingly good things.
It's a good employer.
Right. It's a large mega employer, and yet they're like so happy working there, which I don't think you often hear.
But you hear about again in the New York Times reporting that part of that has been criticized in the past by certain investment, like Deutsche Bank or somebody was saying like, oh, you don't pay attention to investors quite enough. Well, the stock price is still steadily climbed. It's a really strong company, public company, but they do pay attention to their employees as well. And therefore, they are beloved. I don't think that there is a single local company that has that kind of cachet.
Yeah.
I mean, nothing like that anymore.
We got to move on. Worker benefits is the first thing anybody said in the last 5 minutes that helped me understand why anybody feels happy about Costco. All I heard was, and this is my experience, I was a member for a short time also in Reseda or something in Southern California.
Yeah.
I've heard zombie. I've heard fortress.
No, but it's the
I've heard
safe space in the zombie apocalypse.
parking lot traffic jams, gluttony. I came in and bought stuff I didn't need. I don't I'm completely mystified why anybody likes Costco.
Beautiful electronics, cheap eyewear,
Yeah.
and
I get my
contact lenses.
contacts there, yeah.
I understand it's practical. Like bulk stuff is practical. I don't get why the gluttony and the traffic
no, you
jams
will
feel
need
awesome.
them.
Why I don't know why
I
they
am
feel
going to eat
good.
every single one of those mangoes, Bill
Okay.
Radke, and I don't
Okay.
want to hear about it.
I like to
Okay.
wait for an hour before I pump gas. That's my favorite part.
Before we go, some quick headlines. Other election news, a hand recount is coming starting Monday in the Public Lands Commissioner campaign. Democrat Dave Up the Grove is 51 votes ahead of the Republican, Sue Peterson, both trying to face the vote leader, Republican Jamie Herrera Butler. The Democratic governor candidate Bob Ferguson canceled his debate with his Republican opponent Dave Reichert, scheduled through the Washington Debate Coalition in October. If I haven't seen Ferguson give a reason, I don't know what it is, but there's still scheduled debate in September, though. Biden administration announced free COVID tests again. You can get 4 test kits mailed to you starting in September. I have 1,000 old kits already teetering in my garage, but there's that. Paul Allen's stuff is being auctioned again. Dyer, you mentioned this to me. Allen co-founded Microsoft. He had money. He had stuff. Anything
Take a look at the photos online. The thing that you expect the computers and the tech, but the art that is being auctioned off, I found so impressive, and you don't really expect this futuristic mid-century art to be, but it is pretty gorgeous.
Okay, and last one is the manager of the Mariners, Scott Service, fired, replaced with one of the old Mariners heroes, former All-Star catcher Dan Wilson. Maybe Edgar Martinez as a coach in there as well.
Dan the man.
Dan the man. I'm worried, though, when a Mariners manager loses, we resent him or her, maybe someday a her, but I'm afraid. Are we going to not like Dan Wilson and Edgar Martinez if the team stinks?
I had a poster of Dan Wilson on my wall growing up. I am never going to break up with Dan Wilson.
Good.
So don't worry, no
Good.
matter how badly they suck.
I don't watch
me feel
football,
better.
so I don't know what to say.
I know. That makes me smile. Speaking of which, I got
Nice,
that.
nice.
I got that. Anything made you smile this week before we go?
I have one.
Yeah.
The not that breaking up is good, but J-Lo and Ben Affleck breaking up have started some people talking about, stay with me, Dyer, some people talking about Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton, who had famous 2 marriages over the years. Now J-Lo and Ben Affleck were engaged and then, married the second time around for a brief time.
Mhm.
But I just love a book that I read about Elizabeth Taylor and Richard Burton. It's called Furious Love. I recommend it to anybody who enjoys it's a beach read. It was by 2 journalists who wrote about this love affair. It's really more of a book explaining the mystic power of certain actors who are able to translate to the screen, because Richard Burton was a famous stage actor who never quite could translate the way that Liz Taylor could. And this couple of journalists had access to a lot of their letters. It's a great book, Furious Love, and it's old, 15 years old, but the J-Lo Affleck saga brought up memories of that book, and I recommend it to folks.
Furious Love, and we're out of time, so you're just going to have to write to them personally and find out why David Boze and Dyer Oxley are smiling. Washington Policy Center Communications Director David Boze, thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
Of course. KUOW's daily newsletter, O'Tour. Dyer Oxley, thank you, Dyer.
Thank you.
Soundside host and co-host of the, have you heard, Sound Politics podcast, Libby Denkman, thank you so much.
I have a second politics podcast, what?
Great to see you all, and thank you for listening. I'm Bill Radke, and I'll be back in a week with Week in Review.
Thanks.
Right here on KUOW-FM Seattle, KUOW Tumwater, KQOW Bellingham.
Welcome to News Off from the BBC World.